We're ready.
Stand by.
Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kasen, and it is Thursday. That's May 29th, and I have with me, not exactly in the studio, but still Ray Hartman. You're as great as ever in the studio or out.
I'm with you in spirit.
That's right. And also, I've got some live words here. And, you know, in 2025, there's plenty to say. So on the phone or however we're doing this, it'll work fine. Anybody watching can see the magic of how I'm working this out through the telephone speaker, but it doesn't matter. And by the way, Ray, let me say this. I've got a shout out here this afternoon. I promised my oldest granddaughter that I would say hello to Aaliyah, and she is absolutely a brilliant fifth grade student. So I just thought I'd do that. So
that is a very fine shout out and well deserved.
Absolutely. Yeah, Aaliyah is pretty amazing. Okay, so you know, here we are in the middle of the latest brouhaha going on over Donald Trump's imbecilic decisions. Of course, he wanted to have tariffs, which, and by the way, Ray, I'm going to assume, because I know you've gone to a few years of university. Where'd you go to? University of Missouri in Mizzou?
I did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So, you know, it seems to me that somewhere along the line, you probably had the class, which has been memorialized forever in that shot of Ben Stein on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they point out that the tariffs, at that time it was the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, led to the Great Depression. So I'm going to assume you heard that in either high school or college, right?
Yeah, well, I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible, so
Gotcha.
I don't remember even being in class much. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's, I mean, and as you know as well as anybody, tariffs are a complicated subject, but that they are at the end of the day taxes, and at the, you know, I think that there's no question that the, you know, there's some real, well, there's legal problems as we're seeing with the ability of a president just to act unilaterally in this and so many other ways, as if we had a unitary form of government.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is that the court yesterday, and it was a lot of people are saying it's an unusual court, but it's still a court. It's a regular court. And it ruled yesterday that the tariffs are unconstitutional and illegal in the way that Donald introduced them into our system and is trying to enforce them. So they stopped them yesterday, so that blocked the tariffs. But today, another court stepped up and blocked the block.
Well, yeah, that's just the Court of Appeals. And
that's right.
That was not, I'm no lawyer, but that was not a surprise. Like so many of these issues, I mean, so much of what's going on right now, Mark, we're going to, and I assume at an increasing pace, find out what the United States Supreme Court's going to do on this and so many other issues. And we're in a very awkward position right now in the Trump 2 administration, because it's just been, feels like longer, but it's just a little over 4 months. And this is just a prelude. It's really going to come down. A lot of questions are going to come down to how, not only how the U.S. Supreme Court rules on this subject and others, but also whether, and this is the first, whether the President of the United States is going to abide by the Supreme Court's rulings. And this is the first time in our life, really first time in American history, where that's unknown.
Yeah, well, I would assume that at some point Donald's going to attempt to defy the Supreme Court. But I don't know what they're going to do about the tariff thing, because it's such a bizarre breakdown between the conservatives and the liberals, and sometimes Coney Barrett goes one way and sometimes John Roberts goes another way as well, and that could be a 5-4 win for the liberals. But that's all hard to say at this point. But I will say this much, and that is that I really hate what the Democratic Party is doing about tariffs, because, you know, what they're saying is that in some situations, tariffs are not bad, and so it's just how we enforce them and who we put the tariffs on that are really the issues. And the reason I hate that, Ray, is because it really opens the door to a lot of very conservative people listening to this and saying, Donald isn't that far from what we think ought to be, because the Democrats even agree. If the Democrats were to say, these tariffs, in the past they led us into depression, and it's just 100% wrong, and he shouldn't be doing it, I think the people would respond. What do you think?
Well, I'm not an apologist right now for the Democratic Party, but I'll actually defend that point of view a little bit here, in that all tariffs are not bad. I mean, there are appropriate uses for tariffs, particularly if there's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, but in a very minor way, Ray. In such a minor way that you're opening the door to a bunch of imbeciles believing that Donald might be okay.
Well, I don't think that's true. We've always had tariffs, okay? And they aren't 100% bad. The question is how you use them. And I think both things can be true, Mark. I think on one hand, and again, I'm not really interested in getting into the Democrats' strategy. I really haven't even followed it. But it is true that tariffs are a tool in the toolkit of not only a president, but Congress. I mean, that's one of the keys here, is tariffs were never intended to be, you know, a weapon, you know, used at the whims of a very unstable president to punish people and threaten people and other nations. I mean, and otherwise just, you know, and in a way that's just so reckless. But it doesn't follow that all tariffs. I mean, there are times when we put tariffs on countries for inhumane working conditions. We've put them on for grossly unfair, including China. We've put them on tariffs. We've used tariffs to level playing fields when the other countries are cheating or stealing our stuff. I mean, I'm not going to say that all tariffs are terrible. And I don't think it necessarily supports Trump. There's two big problems. Well, there's a number of big problems. But the ones that stand out with Trump are, first of all, the instability of what he's doing. He's just wrecked the markets. You know this as well as anybody, because he has introduced not only uncertainty into our economic and our tariff policy, but he's gone as far, and this has never been done, to attack and damage our closest allies. And so he's also created great uncertainty internationally among our allies, among our friends, as to the reliability of the word and the full faith and credit, or whatever you want to call it, in the United States of America. That's the biggest problem. And then there's also the fact that even if the tariffs, it does not have to follow that 100% of tariffs on, say, China are 100% of the tariffs, not 100% tariff, are wrong. It's just the way it's being done really violates the letter and spirit of U.S. law on this subject. And it needs tariffs are going to say they need to be, judicious, and fairly rare, I think. But I just think it's what we've got going on here. Of course, is chaos, which the president seems to thrive on, and we're just gonna have to see what happens. As I say, I think you made a reference to how the Supreme Court is unpredictable. I think that's an understatement. I don't think anybody should be trying to predict which direction this court is going to go when this slew of cases. I mean, we're not just talking about this. We're talking about just all kinds of major, what look like they may be landmark decisions that have to come, because Donald Trump is very clearly trying to carve out a monarchy. I mean, not a monarchy, well, at least an authoritarian form of government. And so a lot of all these pressure points, and they're all over the place. They're not just, they're on foreign policy, they're on immigration, they're on the tariffs, they're on a wide range of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Well, let me
I
talk.
don't think I'm not going to make any predictions. I wouldn't listen to anybody who's going to make a prediction.
Yeah. Well, let me talk to you about another case, and the reason I bring this one up especially is because it's one that is very close to home for both of us, because it involves this situation at Harvard where obviously Donald says that he's trying to protect the Jews. He wants to save us from anti-Semitism. And in the first place, most Jews are now standing up and saying, Donald, if anybody's going to protect us, it shouldn't be you. So go away. But having said that much, I know that we both believe that nobody should be attacking Harvard. I mean, Harvard is one of the crown jewels in our university system that makes this country the great place that it is. And especially in terms of all of these people from all over the world who are welcomed into Harvard. And by the way, they pay full tuition. In many cases, their countries pay the tuition bill. And of course, Donald says it isn't true, but it is true. That's a fact. It's easily provable. And the problem is that there are people in the United States who don't mind trying to tear down our university system. Where did that all come from?
It's unprecedented what he's doing. I mean, for this, and I wrote my Substack, Ray Hartman's soapbox on Substack. Little plug there.
No, not make it a little one. Make it a big one.
I thought it was interesting. The Wall Street Journal, which is a very conservative editorial page traditionally, really called out Trump on this and made the point that there's just no point to his war on Harvard and Columbia and other universities. I mean, the pretext about anti-Semitism is let's just say it's insulting on its face, coming from a guy who's known for repeated acts of anti-Semitism in public. I mean, that didn't even debate him. I mean, he's known for addressing Jewish groups and referring to Israel as your country.
Sure.
I mean, he's been widely quoted as saying he likes the little guys with yarmulkes watching his money. I mean, it goes on
right.
and on.
Oh, he says it.
Kanye West. I mean, he dines with known anti-Semites. Yeah. So no, I mean, that's not the point. And the fact that he's got a Jewish in-law, is also kind of an insulting way to answer.
Yeah,
The point
who
is,
happens
and
to
I
be
don't mean to
stealing,
I'm not
who
calling him.
happens to be stealing
Let me be clear.
billions of
Yeah,
dollars, but
let me finish here real quick. I want to be clear. I'm not referring to him as an anti-Semite. That's an unnecessary path to go. But he has had repeated instances of comments that can only be construed in that way. And so for him to, the whole pretext of this having anything to do with anti-Semitism is ludicrous. But as far as Harvard goes, I mean, the Wall Street Journal called him out, and of course, what was really kind of pathetic, and the reason I wrote about it, is they felt the need, even though they were saying the right things for the right reasons about how ridiculous and self-defeating this is to attack Harvard for a lot of reasons, they had to point out, they said, well, this isn't unlike what Barack Obama did to Corinthian colleges. And it's like, hello? And they brought that up as if they could do some whataboutism. That was a fraud. They were widely accused and found guilty. I mean, they weren't criminally found guilty, but they lost several, like 7-figure lawsuits. The college is defunct. It went bankrupt and died. And they were sued by the SEC. It was never a political thing. I mean, it was always it was a prosecution. And they're trying to liken that to what happened with Trump. Bottom line is this: that it's I don't know where it's going to go, but the attack on education, both public and private, in the interest of advancing revisionist history about slavery, whether it's about the idea that any mention of diversity, equity, and inclusion, like those are now dirty words. I mean, I never thought we'd get to a point where saying you're for diversity is like a bad thing or a racist thing. So yeah, I think we live in a pretty perilous time.
yeah. Now, universities almost universally support diversity. I have to say that this is where it's so easy to get into trouble with Donald Trump, because he talks about things that are imbecilic, and there are people who will jump on board with him, not understanding that, like, for example, diversity. I mean, what could possibly be wrong with having either a diverse country or a diverse university or a diverse neighborhood or anywhere where you just have a lot of different kinds of people together, which sounds to me like the United States of America from its inception, although we've done bad things. But the point is, people from this country, in this country, come from many different parts of the world.
Well, it's interesting because, and I'll be politically incorrect here for a minute, DEI as practiced, in other words, DEI programs have been imperfect at best. Okay, there have been, the concept to me is extraordinarily important of diversity, equity, inclusion. Unfortunately, and it's one of the things that cost Democrats a lot in the last election, whether they want to face it or not, is a lot of people have been turned off by some of the language of the DEI programs, some of and a lot of the peripheral issues. I know, for example, I've taken DEI tests, and I won't say where, which really weren't great. Okay, you had to answer the way the tester, or you couldn't continue. You could only finish the test if you answered the right answers that you were given, and so that wasn't really not a test.
Well, that sounds crazy.
No, it was, and I'm not one of the people who's going to stick up. I've been fighting for affirmative action, for example, way before it was fashionable, and been vocal about that for 40 years, and I still remain that way. And I believe in DEI, but there's no question that it was, in a lot of times, overbearing, and put people in, very defensive positions. The whole issue of pronouns is kind of stemmed from that kind of group of cultural issues, and and I happen to be very passionate about trans rights, but we have the Democrats and the people on the left of the center have really lost the room on that issue, and there's just, unless they want to face it, we're going to keep losing.
Well,
Okay.
one of the things.
My point being this.
Yeah, go ahead.
But here's my point, Mark. What's amazing about what Trump's doing is, and the administration is actually taking what is the kind of common ground in the middle, which is that people don't want to be guilt tripped as much as maybe they have been, and now they're doing things like word searches to wipe out any reference in any government agency to words like diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's nuts. And they've taken it so far in the other direction, and one that, quite frankly, if there's a better word than racist to describe it, I don't know what that word is. I mean, they have literally taken this kind of center issue, I don't even know if it's center left or right. The issue in the center, the fact that a lot of people were turned off to the tone and the language of the DEI efforts, and now they're like, the same people were not opposed to diversity. They were opposed to the way some programs were implemented, and they've taken this to a crazy extreme. I gotta believe it's going to backfire. I mean, because most Americans believe in diversity.
Yeah, well, but there is a problem. There is a problem.
Call it that. I do think that people on the left need to be a little more sensitive to the fact that DEI, as imposed in their view on them, could be trouble.
Well, okay.
And again,
but here's something to remember. When people say DEI and don't like it, that group is generally taking DEI to mean black. I mean, they really are. I mean,
I'm sorry, they're taking it to mean what?
To mean black. I
don't think so.
No. I think
that's where I'm going to sound a little like Bill Maher here. That might make some of your listeners mad. But no, it isn't that. It's not. I'm telling you, I've never been accused of not being on the. Well, let me just put this way. Let's keep me out of it. Other than to say, no, you can actually look at some of the things that have been advanced in the name of DEI, and reasonable people who are not at all black or racist or anything else can be turned off by that. And
okay,
I think that we make the assumption that they are, and it's one of the reasons we lose. I mean, you've got to understand there's a vast swath of the American public that, whatever their views on race are not, they're not actively racist, but they can, in fact, resent when they feel that they've been victimized by going too far with programs that, and there are instances, I'm telling you, I mean, we can pretend that they're not, but, people shouldn't feel shamed because they're white people.
Okay. But here's the thing, Ray.
I don't agree that. I think we have to have a more level-headed understanding that the opposition, that the folks that were kind of hostile to DEI were not necessarily, they were stoked by politicians, but I don't want to assume that they're racist.
Okay, but and you could say it one way for sure, and I'm going to say that they're racist, but here's why. I'll tell you why. If you go back to George Bush, you remember, I'm sure, I know you do, when they used Willie Horton in order to win an election. And then, fast forward into the more modern time, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia used critical race theory to do the same thing that George Bush did with Willie Horton. And I have to say that although I agree with you, there are people that can go too far with anything. But on the other hand, I think that the whole anti-DEI thing, which ends up removing black exhibits out of museums, I think that is just an extension of George Bush, Glenn Youngkin, all the way to the present, taking critical race theory and making it into DEI and taking advantage of the fact that there are a lot of white people in this country who honestly believe, and I know you're not there, but they are, that black people have been given too much. Aren't there people like that?
There are. And the problem is, if, you reference to Bush, I thought it was shameful back then that George H.W. Bush, his campaign did that. But it's even more shameful that it worked.
Yeah, exactly.
and
it worked very well.
Well, and so the question is, moving forward, particularly for Democrats, and I'm kind of back to thinking of myself as independent, which is what I've been. I ran as, very proudly to be part of the Democratic Party running, but I've always been as a journalist, which I'm kind of getting back into, as independent. And even when I worked for my dear friend who just passed away, Kit Bond, a wonderful man, a Republican, I was an independent back then. And I don't think, you and I look at it a little differently in that we won't win if we want to suggest that the George Bush wing of the Republican Party is racist. We can do it. You can say it. It's a free country. We won't win. Okay, we will not win elections because, frankly, the George Bush wing of the Republican Party, if you want to call it that, or the George W. The Bushes wing, is probably the best hope for reining in Trump. And the fact is, I'm happy to be a little politically incorrect on this, but no, I don't think it's productive to be using those assumptions. There are people who voted for Donald Trump who are racist, okay? And if we assume they are, we're not going to win them over. Or if we tell them they're racist, they're not going to listen to us, and we can't win elections by, it's just true. We saw what happened. I mean, the tragedy of this man getting reelected should be a wake-up call to our side that you cannot roll like this, and it's not productive. And honestly, Mark, you mentioned anti-Semitism. There's a heck of a lot of anti-Semitism on the left right now. I mean, tied into the Palestinian protests. And much as my heart goes out to the Palestinian people, we're not so willing to call it out on the left, and we should be. Now, that does not follow that respecting people's free speech is anti-Semitic. And of course, it's really galling to see people who don't care about anti-Semitism trying to invent some, broad swath, to attack institutions they don't like Harvard and Columbia, as anti-Semitic is just pathetic, as you know. But no, I think we need to have a more clear-eyed understanding that if we're going to end this kind of trend toward an autocracy, we better start realizing that communicating to people who we disagree with and winning their hearts and minds actually kind of matters.
Yeah.
And you don't get them by telling them they're racist. I'm sorry.
Well, you and
that's
I.
my view of it. I guess I've become a centrist in my old age.
Well, no, I wouldn't say centrist, but
it's partly from being out there. It's my one campaign. I don't think that, and I think that to the extent Democrats could get their act together a little better, I think there could very well emerge an enormous consensus of people, particularly if we stop fighting with one another, who believe that even if they voted for MAGA, if they voted for Trump, who are very concerned and realizing that they've been conned.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of thing we need, rather than I think we're taking the bait if we let Trump divide us.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Hillary should not have called people deplorable, and yet
That was just.
it was dumb. It was dumb. But I think a lot of us understand what she meant. But I understand the people who were being called deplorables certainly did not understand it. I get it. They took
We
it.
wouldn't like it if somebody called us.
Well, they do.
Well,
I mean,
understand,
listen.
but we don't.
I
My
mean,
point is,
this
look,
guy
you know,
is calling us.
Mark.
This guy's
somebody-
calling us scum.
When somebody tells us we're scum or deplorable, do we vote for them? No. And so the point is that this is the problem. And I'm not going to dwell on Hillary. That's too much of the past. But it is instructive that I'm not going to respond to somebody who talks to me like that, and nor you. And we can't be that person. We cannot be the ones who look at them and say things like that about them and then expect that the folks in the soft center of the country who actually determine outcomes are going to be with you.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump.
So let me ask you this question.
Donald Trump speaks their language.
So let me
okay?
ask you this question. Here's,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
here, this is one. I mean, you gotta figure this. You've got Donald Trump going around the world with his people in foreign countries, supporting neo-Nazi parties, which, by the way, every time he supports them in these other countries, they lose. And some of them are on the verge of winning, and he supports them and they lose. But I guess, if you're supporting neo-Nazis in Germany, in Poland, in Romania, in all these different places, and you keep losing, how do you describe that to the American people? And somebody's going to be offended, don't you think?
Well, I'd like to think so. I have to say right now that I'm a little. These kind of international issues resonate heavily with me, and it troubles me that the poll numbers don't reflect what seems to me such a great outrage. I mean, obviously Donald Trump is doing poorly in the context of other presidents at this stage of his administration, but not all that much worse today than he did 2 weeks ago. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the guy shouldn't even be. He shouldn't even be near a White House, right?
I'm mortified at what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, to our country, but like I say, it's a really. In fact, I was thinking about writing about this for Sunday. It's like we've stopped being a kind. We've always been a country that you could describe as, I think, obviously our history's had a lot of ups and downs, but as a kind of relative to the world, I think we've always valued kindness.
Yeah, for 80 years we have.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously we've had some dark chapters in our history, but we were always the good guys, okay? Even when we were not always so great, the country itself was kind of a force for good, and now Trump's affinity for dictators all over the world, be they in the Middle East, and the countries we literally, I wrote again about this. Qatar is a dictatorship, okay?
Sure.
With no rights for people who happen to be in the LGBT community or women, and it's not. I have to say, it's not just the Republicans. Democrats and Republicans have kissed the ring because of the incredible amount of wealth and the disproportionate amount of the world's oil and stuff in some of these countries, and we don't. But we've never had a president that has so openly flirted with and otherwise idolized dictators, and he does it. So my problem, though, is partly with that, but even more so that it doesn't seem to move the needle. And
No, it doesn't
that's
at
the
all.
part that, as an American, troubles me. That a president who does that, and he does it pretty unapologetically, we just don't have, we do not have any outrage when our country, basically doesn't stand for democratic values. And right now, it's hard to argue that we do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like you to say again very clearly what your Substack is,
Okay.
so we can get some people to maybe sign up. Go ahead.
That's so nice. Yeah, just go to Substack. It's Ray Hartman's Soapbox. SOAPBOX. Pretty easy to find if you just Google Ray Hartman Soapbox. I think it gets you there, and I appreciate that. I'm writing 2 or 3 times a week and really enjoying it. I'm doing more national stuff. Haven't decided what I'm doing long term, but I really enjoy it, and so I appreciate you having me on and doing that. Anytime you want, we can banter back and forth. As I say, I'm very troubled, obviously, like everybody is, about where we're headed. But I keep looking at it and thinking the next big pivot point is going to be when these cases finally make their way to the Supreme Court, and we decide whether the Supreme Court's going to make a stand for democracy, and B, whether it's going to be heeded if it does.
Yeah. Now, let me say this. I've gone a little bit over where I said I was going to go with you, but let me just ask you this one, because this is a really good history question for the day. I brought this up to Jim Berger, my friend, and he's a real history person. He really knows a lot, and he was shocked at what I told him today. And I don't know if you've heard this one. You know who President John Tyler was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I've heard. I mean, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm old. I ain't that old.
Yeah, neither one of us is that old. But do you know he was the 10th president of the United States, okay? 10th president. And his grandson, listen to this, his grandson died today.
Oh my goodness!
He was 96 years old.
That would only be his grandson going back that far?
Exactly. See, that's what nobody can believe. It's John Tyler's grandson who died today at 96 years old. He was actually the 15th. His father was the 15th child of John Tyler. So he obviously had this large number of children.
He is.
2 wives.
Yeah, that's for you. 15
and this guy dies in 2025.
I had kids in my 50s, so I'm going to guess if he had 15 kids, he did too.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to judge that for you, Mark. I will say that if I remember correctly, he was a Democrat, but he was also a slave owner. Okay? And so we got to be, it's. He was. I'm pretty sure he was. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was a slave owner. And our side.
Well, he certainly was during that time period.
Sometimes, but that's amazing that he'd still have a grandchild.
Absolutely incredible.
So early on,
the 10th president of the United States. Unbelievable.
He was president, in like. Well, it was well before the Civil War.
It was before the Civil War.
Probably, I'm going to guess he was in like the 40s.
That absolutely, because William Henry Harrison became president, and then he dropped dead from the.
Yeah, he dropped dead right after.
And then Tyler took over. Anyway, Ray, listen, I thank you. We'll get you in here in the studio, but
thanks.
But right now, you go have a great day, and
thank you for having me on, Mark. And
you bet.
All the listeners, and thank you so much.
You bet. Okay. Ray Hartman. So that's the story there, and we're going to do a little business now. And let's start with the St. Louis Suit Company. And, of course, as always, I point out that I'm wearing a suit, tie, shirt, everything from the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. And they're just a terrific place for men to buy clothes and all kinds of clothes. And of course, I always point out that the top buy, you can't get a better buy than this. You go to the St. Louis Suit Company and you buy a tie. And all my ties are nice ties. This is a nice tie. This is they're all silk. This is a silk tie, St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton, $5. There's just no getting around it. Terrific buy. The suits are great. Everything else, very high quality. And of course, I always point out too that this is the right time to go and look for an overcoat. I understand you're not going to wear an overcoat. Not now. But you're going to need it in about 5-6 months. And right now, if you buy it for cheap, well, you'll have it in 5-6 months, and you won't have to walk in there and pay the top dollar because they're going to try to get those things out of the store right now. So St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton, they're terrific. They're on the corner of Central and Forsyth in Clayton. You walk up the stairs, you're in the place. I know you can see all the suits and everything that they're showing on the screen right now. And I can tell you that you just can't beat these people. They've been there for 30 years. There's a good reason. It's because they do a great job. Jay is the dad. Nick is the son. The whole family is involved. And let me also remind you that when it comes to a wedding, well, this is definitely the place you want to go because they definitely handle men's wedding attire, and they're famous for it, and they do a great job. So check them out in Clayton. That is the St. Louis Suit Company. Now, if you move on down the road, you can go on Highway 40 over to Hampton, and that's 4506 Hampton is where you want to go, and you're going to find yourself at it's just a great jewelry company, and it's called Jewels on Hampton. And this is owned by another very good friend of mine. His name is Al. His son is AJ. They run the business. They buy and sell coins and jewelry, and they design jewelry. And I always point out that, if you go in there and look at the jewelry, they can also fix your watch because they do everything. And it's just a good place to go to, talk to Al. He's an enjoyable person. He's also a trustworthy person when it comes to jewelry, and we just love them. They are Jewels on Hampton, 4506 Hampton. Now, we're getting to Friday, and Friday, my good friend James Ingram has always said for years, is Spaghetti and Meatballs Day on Showdown. It's obviously there every day, and really, I have pointed out that the spaghetti and meatballs at Telena's in Creve Coeur, the spaghetti and meatballs are the best. They really are. People will say this place has got great stuff, but I'm just telling you, go and check it out, and you'll find out that their spaghetti and meatballs are the best. They really are. And so you go to 141 and Olive, and you'll find in that big shopping center there, you'll find Telena's, and you'll just love their food. They've got all the regular pasta. Everybody says their pizza's the best, but I say it's the spaghetti and meatballs. They are absolutely the best, and that is Telena's in Creve Coeur. And remember, 40 years for Telena's, not 30, 40. Just a great business. And finally, if you move on even further west, you can get yourself out to Wente's, W-E-N-T-E. That's Wente's. It's in Chesterfield Valley. It's at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. And I have to tell you, they've got, not my favorite, but for everybody else, it seems everybody in St. Louis thinks that the wings at Wente's are the best. And they may be the best. It's just that I don't eat wings. But if you like wings, everybody says the place to go is Wendy's. Now, here's the thing. I'm sort of a little bit of a contrarian on this one, as I am on a lot of things. But if you go to Wendy's, they've got baby back ribs and onion rings. And those baby back ribs and onion rings, to me, are the best thing that you can get at Wendy's. You'll love it. Fabulous food. They've got hamburgers and cheeseburgers. They've got salads. They've got iced tea. It's really the best iced tea I've ever had. And it's just in Chesterfield Valley. It's Wendy's. You'll love it. Ben runs it. He's great. He and his wife put this together, and they just created a great environment out in Chesterfield. So definitely buy your wings and your baby back ribs at Wendy's. Okay, so Ray is a great guy. Ray Hartman, we had him on here. We set it up, a little differently, and I used the cell phone technology and so forth. Which, by the way, next week I'm told we're going to be able to take phone calls here, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then we could also have people who don't make it into the studio on the phone. In this case, Ray felt like he was getting some kind of a bug, and I didn't want it, so I told him to stay home and come through the cell phone. And we did that, and it was great. I do disagree a little with Ray in one respect, and Ray is very progressive, and so am I. But here's the thing. If you tell the Republican Party in the United States that Donald Trump is not that far from being right on tariffs, the tariffs are really sometimes a good thing, I think you're asking for trouble. People are just not going to believe that he's horrible when he really is horrible. And his tariff ideas, beyond the fact that they just are being used improperly and according to some courts right now, illegally, it's worse than that. We have seen in the history of our country where we have used tariffs and they have sent us straight down the economic drain into depression and ultimately worldwide depression. So, I'm just a person that warns against this whole tariff idea. I'm not saying that if you use a tariff that you're an imbecile like Trump. It's not that. I'm just saying that in general, tariffs are a bad idea. They don't help us. They actually have a history of hurting us. And in the case of 2025, they are destroying world commerce. So I would not be too anxious to give any credit to anybody who's out here talking about tariffs. But I understand Ray is trying to be nice about it, but I'm not trying to be nice. I'm trying to be accurate. Tariffs are a problem. They're a giant problem, and our country does not need to go down that road, although we are right now, but we are really raising the potential for some serious damage in our business with Canada, with Mexico, certainly with China. We don't need to destroy China with tariffs. China's doing a very good job of destroying itself economically right now. And the last thing that we need to do is push them all the way to the bottom, because I promise you, if China goes down too far, they're not going to praise us. They're not going to be our friend. They're going to become extremely adversarial, dangerously so, in my opinion. And I think the last thing that we need to do is to cause serious damage to the Chinese economy. We do business with China. We buy things that are manufactured in China, and we have to, because the United States is not a manufacturing country. That's not what we do best. We provide the world with legal services, medical services, accounting services, all kinds of services. In fact, just so you know, our economy is 80% services. That's what we do. When we look at our gross domestic product, 80% of it is services. So the last thing you want to do is downgrade the importance of services. They are great. They are important. They make us very wealthy. And then other countries, they are manufacturing centers. And we buy from them what they do best, and they buy from us what we do best. And that's how world trade works, and that's how the United States has become the greatest economic power on the face of the planet. So you can start parsing things and ending up figuring that we're losing something by not doing manufacturing, but I just have to tell you, we're not losing anything. We're gaining a lot. We exceed every country in the world when it comes to our total gross domestic product. We exceed China. China's half of what we are, and they're the second most powerful country on the earth. So I would not get too carried away in supporting the idea of tariffs or in fearing the idea that other countries are manufacturing centers, because actually it's okay. We have done a great job of succeeding wildly beyond anybody's imagination by becoming a service-based economy. Just the way it is. It works. So if you want to kill this economy, well, you just keep pounding on all these people all over the world, because I can tell you right now it won't work. Another thing that won't work is where Donald Trump makes deals with other countries that benefit him to the exclusion of actually our own private benefit for America. One of the things this has been described as, and I think it's accurate, is it's extortion. And let me explain what I mean. And this is purely extortion. The United States goes to Vietnam, and I mentioned this briefly the other day, and tells Vietnam, we will give you some good things. We may not write it out on paper right now. And the reason we're not going to write it out on paper is because we don't want to get in trouble. That is, Donald doesn't want to. But what they want is this. Donald wants Vietnam to put $1.8 billion. I was even amazed that it's that much, but it is. It's $1.8 billion into building a golf course in Vietnam. And in return, what are we going to do? Well, we don't really know at this point, but I am afraid of what it might be. And the reason I'm afraid is simple. Vietnam is a very big manufacturing country. They manufacture all kinds of things that come to the United States. And I understand that 40 years ago, we were running out of Vietnam as fast as we could because we lost a war there, which we actually deserved to lose because we did the wrong thing from the beginning to the end. But as it turns out, other people in our ongoing economic development since we ran out of Vietnam, I said 40, but it was actually 50 years ago, what we've done is we've connected with Vietnam, and we buy lots of things that are manufactured there. It's all good for us that we buy those things from Vietnam. So now Donald goes to Vietnam and tells them that he wants them to build a $1.5 billion golf course. And I think you do have to ask the question, what is Donald promising them? He wants that golf course. This is for him. It's his golf course. It's his name on it. This is a Donald Trump extravaganza, a golf course in Vietnam. And so in return for his personal benefit, I don't know, is he going to give Vietnam a lower tariff rate? Is he going to do something for Vietnam to allow Vietnam to continue to sell manufactured goods to the United States? I mean, clearly, Donald is courting Vietnam in order to create a relationship that is not the same as it is with other countries. And the greatest example of that that's also pretty scary is, of course, Russia. You know, we have right now, currently, sanctions, that is, punishments on Russia. And it's because of things that Russia has done over the years. It's because Russia kills people. They have, they've put people into Siberia because they don't like their political points of view. They've murdered people in Siberia. Navalny, who was the major opponent to Vladimir Putin, went to Siberia. He was sent there as a prisoner. And then after he was sent there, he was killed there. So, yeah, there's some bad people out here. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is basically rewarding them. Because in the case of Russia, all the bad things that have brought on sanctions to Russia over the years, up until now, Donald, who has put tariffs on everybody in the world, and that's everybody. Look, there were people who talked about the penguins in some island places where there were no people there, and the penguins had tariffs put on them, but no tariffs on Russia. So you're going to have to explain to me what the reason is for no tariffs on Russia. Sounds to me like some kind of a deal has been made. And yeah, Donald has said in the last few days he's upset with Vladimir Putin for murdering Ukrainians, killing Ukrainians with gigantic barrages of bombing into Kiev and other places. Donald says, yeah, you can't do that, Vladimir. We might have to do something about it. But it's interesting. We might have to do something about it. But there's no might when it comes to Europe. We put tariffs on them. There's no might when it comes to Canada, Mexico, China, and everyone else. We're out there with no fear whatsoever, tariffing everybody in sight. Maybe not Vietnam because they might do a golf course for Donald. But Russia, yeah, he doesn't like what they're doing, he says. I say he's giving Russia a bit of a wink and saying, yeah, don't do it, Vladimir. But, if you do, hey, what are we going to do about it? Nothing much. Oh, well, bad things in some parts of the world, certainly bad things in the United States that we never imagined would be possible. But we're dealing with them right now. We've got some people on the Democratic Party side who are fighting back. I do agree with Ray. I've never been a 100% gung-ho, I just love Democrats. No, it's not about that. It's about the fact that Democrats have taken the positions, for me, that have given us an opportunity to push back against the people who have been doing bad things. And here we are. The Democrats are all we've got. That's the party that we need to support because no one else is going to beat Donald but the Democratic Party. It's not going to be independents. It's not going to be Republicans who would normally have supported Rockefeller or George H.W. Bush or somebody like that. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to be the Democrats. They're going to have to be the ones who win. And there's an election coming, and that election is coming in 1 year. So what we need to do as a nation is get behind the Democrats and support them in opposition to the craziest people that we can think of or remember on the face of our planet, except, of course, the Nazis in World War II. And that's the shame of this, is that Donald is essentially a Nazi. He is a supporter of neo-Nazi parties around the world. He supported the ADP party in Germany in the last election, and they were neo-Nazis. They were the Nazis in Germany today. And the only good news is, as soon as Donald showed up in support of the ADP, they lost. And so that's what we have to keep in mind. You know, Donald's a dangerous man. He's a scary person. He's not just an opponent to us in our political position, in our political system. He is a dangerous man who brings us every week, every day, closer to confrontations with people in the world who are supposed to be our friends. Unfortunately, that's not happening. Oh well. As we head into a weekend in what could begin to feel like the summer, hopefully this will start to feel like the summer. I know here in St. Louis we've had a lot of rain. It hasn't been as bad as it was earlier. It hasn't been as bad as it's been in other places of the country. But it's been raining, and it's no fun. We all want to go to the swimming pool. We all want to enjoy Memorial Day. And here it comes. You know, the Memorial Day has passed, but here it comes. That's the post-Memorial Day period when we're supposed to be at our pools and enjoying the weather. And so let's hope that all over the country we can get rid of some of this dangerous weather that has been pretty harmful. It might help if we'd stop defunding the meteorologists, which in fact Donald Trump has been doing. Oh well, we're out of here today. The name of this program, of course, is Showdown. And I'm Mark Kasen. I'll see you next Monday. Good night.